The city of Jerusalem stood quiet beneath the early morning sun. Its golden walls glowed softly, and the sound of prayers drifted across the narrow streets. From the Mount of Olives to the ancient markets, the city seemed eternal, a living museum of faith and history. But beneath those stones, beneath the dust of centuries, something older and far more mysterious waited to be found. Layla Haddad, a 34-year-old archaeologist, walked through the crowded streets with a sense of purpose. She had spent her entire career studying ancient sites in the Middle East, but nothing had ever pulled her toward a place the way Jerusalem did. Her dark hair was tied back, her boots were covered in dust, and a small leather journal hung from her. Shoulder inside it were pages filled with sketches, symbols, and notes from forgotten ruins. She worked for the University of London's Near Eastern Research Division and had recently been sent to Jerusalem to assist in cataloguing historical maps and private collections. Many of these documents were hidden away in archives or owned by old families whose ancestors had once worked with British and Ottoman explorers. Her task was simple, yet thrilling, to examine those forgotten papers and trace any evidence of unknown structures beneath the old city. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the dome of the rock, Layla sat in a small office inside the Albright Institute, surrounded by piles of faded papers. She gently unfolded a brittle diary. She had found in a box marked Survey Records 1883. It belonged to a British surveyor named Arthur Pembroke, a man whose name she had only seen once before in a footnote about early mapping of Jerusalem. The handwriting was neat, precise, and every line carried a sense of disciplined observation. At first the entries were ordinary. He wrote about wells and water tunnels, old Roman walls, and Ottoman boundaries. But then one line caught her attention. Beneath the northern ridge lies a chamber circular, in shape sealed long before Solomon's time, found by Hassan, who swears by the Almighty that it breathes when touched. A small hand-drawn map accompanied those words. It showed the familiar lines of the old city, but marked an area that was now buried under a modern neighborhood near the Damascus Gate. Layla traced the map with her finger. The location did not match any known archaeological site. No cistern, no tomb, no tunnel had ever been recorded there. Beneath the map, Pembroke had scribbled a warning in pencil, not for public notice. She stared at that phrase for a long time, trying to imagine what it meant. Over the next week she compared the diary to other maps and confirmed that Pembroke had indeed surveyed that area during his short stay in Jerusalem. Yet his official reports made no mention of any chamber or discovery. It was as if he had hidden it deliberately. Curiosity burned through her. She shared her findings with Professor David Ben-Ari, a historian from the Hebrew University, who specialized in early Jerusalem cartography. Together, they decided to investigate discreetly under the cover of academic research. They secured temporary permission to use ground-penetrating radar in a small courtyard that matched the coordinates. From Pembroke's sketch, the courtyard belonged to an elderly Arab woman named Fatima, whose family had lived there for generations. She remembered stories from her grandfather about strange echoes that came from the earth whenever someone hammered the ground. After some discussion, she agreed to let them survey the site, as long as they caused no damage. Early one morning, before the city was fully awake, Layla and her team arrived with their equipment. The radar scans began slowly. The machines hummed softly, sending waves into the earth and bouncing signals back to the monitors. For an hour, nothing unusual appeared. Then a deep, hollow void emerged on the screen, roughly 12 meters beneath the courtyard. Its outline was perfect circular and surrounded by solid rock. Her heart raced. She had seen similar readings only in well-preserved chambers. The team inserted a small camera through a thin, drilled shaft. The image that appeared on the monitor made everyone fall silent. A staircase spiraled downward, carved directly into the bedrock and vanishing into shadow. They widened the entry carefully and began their descent. The air grew colder with every step, and a faint smell of old cedar drifted upward. The stairs opened into a circular chamber about 10 meters across the walls, were lined with massive stones, each precisely fitted without mortar. Around the walls ran a carved band of writing in a language that mixed Aramaic with ancient Hebrew, and something else that even Layla could not recognize. At the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, and upon it rested an object wrapped in layers of dark cloth. Layla hesitated before touching it. Every instinct told her that whatever lay inside had been sealed for a reason. But she also knew that discovery always carried risk. With trembling hands, she slowly unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a thin metallic disc about the size of a dinner plate. Its surface shimmered faintly like bronze, yet it felt heavier and smoother. A 7-pointed star was engraved in its center, and a narrow, transparent line ran across it like an embedded crystal. The craftsmanship was unlike anything she had ever seen. It looked ancient, yet far too advanced for its supposed age professor. Ben-Ari examined it with his magnifying lens. The alloy was unfamiliar, and the design contained geometric precision that hinted at mathematical knowledge beyond its era. He whispered softly, "This is not a religious relic. This is something else, something scientific." They packed the disc carefully and sent samples of the surrounding stone to the lab for dating. Within days, the results shocked them. The chamber's structure dated back more than 2,500 years, far older than any known man. Made space in that part of the city, the metal of the disc, however, showed traces of compounds that should not exist naturally together. It was as if someone had combined elements through a process unknown to ancient metallurgy. News of the find began to spread within the academic circle. Rumors traveled quickly. Some said they had found a forgotten temple, others believed it was connected to King Solomon's treasures. A few whispered darker theories, that it was an artifact of the Watchers, ancient beings mentioned in apocryphal texts. Layla tried to ignore the gossip and focus on the science, but she could feel the weight of attention pressing closer each day. One evening, after everyone had left, she returned alone to the chamber carrying a small lantern. The silence down there felt alive. Her footsteps echoed softly off the smooth stone. She placed the disc back on the pedestal and ran her fingers over the 7-pointed star. A faint vibration pulsed beneath her touch, almost like a heartbeat. She pulled her hand back, startled. Then curiosity overcame fear, and she touched it again. This time the transparent line on the disc flickered with a dull light that shimmered once, then faded. Layla stood frozen, trying to understand what had happened. She recorded everything in her notebook. The disc responds to touch emits, faint light, no heat, possible internal reaction, unclear cause. She spent another hour studying the chamber before leaving, but the air felt heavier, as if the place itself were watching her. In the following days, strange things began to happen in the area. Residents near the courtyard reported hearing faint humming sounds at night, and their electrical devices flickered unpredictably. The research instruments sometimes malfunctioned, showing magnetic interference that appeared only when the disc was present. Layla brought the data to Professor Ben-Ari, who analyzed it carefully. The readings indicate an electromagnetic field centered around the disc, but there is no known power source, he said. It behaves almost like a transmitter. The professor's words stirred something deep in her memory. She remembered Pembroke's line, "Not for public notice," and another note beneath it written in Arabic, which she had barely noticed before. It read, "Do not feed the light." That phrase haunted her for days. It sounded less like superstition and more like a warning. She returned to Pembroke's remaining notes and found references to a man named Hassan, who had guided him through the old tunnels. According to the diary, Hassan had claimed that the chamber belonged to an order of guardians who preserved the memory of the earth, and that their device could reveal what the city itself had witnessed. The idea was unbelievable, yet it explained the strange symbols around the walls. Layla began to suspect that the chamber was not just a tomb or a temple, but a kind of recording device built in an age long forgotten. When she compared the symbols with astronomical charts, she noticed that the carvings aligned with constellations that matched the sky over Jerusalem in 586 BCE, the year Babylon destroyed the first temple. That discovery shook her more than anything else. If the artifact truly dated to that era, then it had survived through every empire, every conquest, every layer of civilization. By the end of the week, she could barely sleep. She dreamt of light swirling beneath the city, of voices whispering in languages she did not know. She told herself it was just exhaustion, but part of her believed the disk was trying to communicate something. On the 8th night, a light tremor rippled through the ground. A glass beaker in the lab cracked by itself, and the magnetic readings jumped. Wildly, Layla rushed to the chamber and found the disk glowing faintly on its own. The symbols on the wall shimmered as if written in living fire, and a sound like distant chanting filled the air. She felt both terror and awe. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the glow faded, leaving silence behind. Layla stood alone in the darkness, breathing hard. She knew at that moment that the discovery beneath Jerusalem was not an ordinary archaeological find. It was something that could change everything mankind thought it knew about history, and perhaps even about reality itself. And deep beneath the stones of the city, the hidden secrets of Jerusalem waited to awaken again. The morning. After the strange glow, Layla woke before sunrise, her thoughts restless and tangled. The air in her apartment felt heavier than usual, as if the city itself was breathing through the walls. She poured a cup of bitter coffee and stared out at the rooftops of Jerusalem, where the first call to prayer echoed through the dawn. She could not forget the light she had seen the night before, or the way the walls of the chamber had seemed to move and whisper. By the time she reached the excavation site, the workers were already gathered outside, talking in low voices. Some claimed they had felt the tremor. Others said they had seen a faint beam of light rising through the courtyard floor. The university had sent officials to inspect the place and make sure there was no danger to nearby buildings. The report called it a minor geological shift, but Layla knew better. She had seen the disk come alive. Professor Ben Ari met her at the entrance. He looked pale, his hair uncombed and his voice, and carried a weight she had never heard before. Layla, he said quietly last night, there was a magnetic disturbance recorded across half the city. It started here in this courtyard and spread outward in waves. The readings matched the same frequency we recorded from the disk. She followed him down the staircase, back into the chamber. The air was cool and dry. The disk sat on the pedestal where she had left it, its surface dull again, as if nothing had happened. Yet when she touched it, the metal was still faintly warm. She placed a small sensor near its edge, and the machine blinked weakly, showing traces of residual energy. Professor Ben Ari frowned. I think this device stores energy not from electricity, but from something else. Some field we don't yet understand. It may not be mechanical at all. Before they could continue, a voice called from above. It was Sammy, their field technician. He was carrying a folded letter covered in dust. We found this behind one of the stones, he said, handing it to Layla. The letter was old, written in Arabic and Hebrew mixed together. She recognized Pembroke's handwriting on one side and another signature beneath it in faded ink. The writing was trembling, as if written in fear. The message read, "The chamber remembers it does not sleep. When the light feeds, the air trembles and the veil grows thin. Hassan warns that the city below must not wake. Tell those who come after to seal it again before the watchers return." Layla's hands shook as she read them. Words aloud, silence filled the room, the watchers. The phrase lingered in the air like a cold shadow. David stared at her, his eyes uncertain and fearful. "Do you believe it means angels or something else?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know." But Pembroke clearly thought this place was dangerous. That evening they gathered in the Institute's conference room to discuss what to do next. Some argued they should close the site until more tests could be done. Others wanted to move the artifact to a secure lab. Layla, however, insisted that the disc should remain in the chamber. Removing it might break whatever system it was connected to. During the debate, an unexpected visitor arrived. Sister Miriam, the archivist from the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate. She was an elderly woman with calm eyes and the quiet authority of someone who had read more history than most had lived. She listened patiently to their explanations and then spoke softly. "There are records in our monastery of an ancient object, said to lie beneath the holy city. It was called the Ledger of Witnesses, a thing that remembers every act committed upon this land. The writings say it was hidden so that no man could use it for power." Her words silenced the room. She continued, "If your chamber is what I think it is, then you have found something older than religion, older than the city itself. Some say it was built by those who understood how to read the memory of the earth, not by words, but by vibration." Layla asked her, "Do you mean it can record history?" Sister Miriam nodded slowly. "The earth has memory, child. Every stone holds the echo of what has passed, but to awaken, it is to risk being consumed by what it remembers." The discussion ended without resolution, but that night Layla could not rest. She walked again to the courtyard. The city was asleep, and a soft wind blew through the narrow lanes. The moon hung pale above the domes. She descended into the chamber alone, carrying only a lantern and her notebook. The silence down there felt endless. She placed her hand on the disc again and whispered a question, though she did not know to whom. "What are you, and why were you hidden?" The transparent line on the surface brightened faintly. The air thickened and the carvings on the walls began to shimmer slowly, not as before, but in rhythm, like a heart beating. She felt a gentle pull, as if the chamber itself wanted to show her something. Her vision blurred, and suddenly the stone walls melted into light. She saw flashes of people, not ghosts, but living memories. A market full of traders speaking languages long forgotten, the construction of a massive wall under the bright sun, soldiers marching, priests chanting, fires burning, and then silence. She was no longer standing in the present. The chamber was showing her the past layer after layer, the buried lives of Jerusalem, each one stacked upon the other, like pages in a book. She gasped and stumbled back, breaking the contact. The light vanished, and the chamber returned to darkness. Her pulse was racing, her hands trembled uncontrollably. She realized that Pembroke and Hassan had spoken the truth. The artifact was not only ancient, it was alive in a way that transcended understanding. The next morning, she shared what she had witnessed with Professor Ben Ari and Sister Miriam. Neither doubted her. They both knew she had no reason to invent such a story. Sister Miriam crossed herself and said in a low voice, "The ledger of witnesses has awakened. It remembers everything." They decided to record the chamber's energy patterns for several nights using high-sensitivity sensors. But the data they collected only deepened the mystery. The electromagnetic field appeared to synchronize with certain times of prayer. Across the city, as if responding to human sound itself, the device pulsed faintly whenever the call to prayer or church bells echoed through the streets. One night during the recording session, Sammy pointed at the monitor. "Look at this," he said. The readings just spiked when the bells rang at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. "It is reacting to the vibration of faith." The realization left everyone speechless. It was as if the chamber was connected to the spiritual rhythm of Jerusalem itself, not bound to any single religion, but to the collective energy of belief that had filled the city for millennia. Over the following days, international attention began to grow. Satellite teams, journalists, and government officials started asking questions. The university tried to restrict access, but leaks spread quickly. The world wanted to know what had been found beneath Jerusalem. Layla's inbox flooded with messages from organizations, religious groups, and even military researchers offering to fund further excavation. Some claimed the disk could be a form of ancient technology, perhaps even extraterrestrial. Others accused her of fabricating the discovery to attract fame. She ignored them all and focused on her research, but deep inside, she feared what would happen if the wrong people tried to use the device. Then something unexpected occurred. Late one afternoon, as she and David were reviewing the old maps, Fatima, the elderly homeowner who had allowed the excavation, appeared at the door, carrying a small wooden box. She looked uneasy, and her voice shook slightly. "This belonged to my grandfather," she said. "He told us never to open it, but after seeing the light last week, I think it belongs to you now." Inside the box was an old brass key, the same kind described in Pembroke's diary. Its handle was engraved with the same 7-pointed star that appeared on the disc. Layla felt a chill as she held it. The key was small but heavy. She wondered what it unlocked. That night she returned to the chamber with the key in hand. The walls glowed faintly in the lantern light. She walked along the edge of the circular room, examining every stone, until she noticed one block slightly smaller than the rest. It had a narrow keyhole cut into its side. Hidden behind the carvings, she inserted the key slowly and turned it. A low grinding sound echoed through the chamber, and a small section of the floor began to slide open, revealing a second staircase descending deeper into darkness. The air that rose from below was cold and ancient, carrying a faint metallic scent. Layla stared into the void, knowing that this was the true beginning of what Pembroke and Hassan had feared. The secret they had tried to bury for centuries was not only a single chamber, but something much greater, a network beneath Jerusalem, a hidden world built by hands and minds long vanished. With her lantern trembling in her grasp, she took a deep breath and stepped down into the unknown, unaware that each step was carrying her closer to a truth that would shake the very foundations of human history. The hidden staircase spiraled deep into the earth, each step narrower and colder than the one before. Layla felt her heartbeat echo against the walls. As she descended, her lantern flickered, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone. The air smelled of iron and ancient dust. Somewhere far below, a faint humming sound pulsed like a sleeping heart. She had left a note for Professor Ben Ari and Sister Miriam, telling them not to follow until morning, but curiosity overpowered caution. The deeper she went, the stronger the vibration became. It was not a mechanical sound, but something alive, a resonance that seemed to come from the stones themselves. After what felt like an eternity, the staircase opened into another chamber, larger than the first. This one was rectangular, its ceiling high and arched, supported by pillars carved with complex patterns. The air shimmered faintly, as if invisible energy moved through it. In the center of the room stood a structure made of the same strange alloy as the disc, only larger, shaped like an altar or control table. Its surface was covered with symbols, lines and grooves that seemed to form a map. Layla approached slowly. Her lantern light reflected off the metal, making it glow softly. She ran her hand across the surface and felt warmth pulsing beneath her skin. Then something clicked. The transparent line that ran across the smaller disc appeared again, but now on this larger surface. As she touched it, the symbols lit up in sequence, forming a spiral of light that spread across the room for a moment. She could not move. The walls began to shift, revealing carvings that had been hidden beneath centuries of dust. Each carving showed scenes of people building cities, studying the stars, and drawing energy from the ground itself. They were not depictions of worship, but of science, ancient and precise. Then she saw an inscription written in several languages. The translation formed slowly in her mind. "We were the keepers of memory. We built this place to guard what the earth remembers when men forget. Truth, the stones will speak again." Layla's breath caught in her throat. The ledger of witnesses was not just a myth, it was real, and she was standing inside it. The carvings seemed to tell the story of a civilization older than Babylon, older than Egypt, a people who understood how to read and record the living memory of the planet. They had created a network beneath Jerusalem where history itself was stored not as words, but as energy. The humming grew louder, and the ground trembled slightly. The air shimmered with light, and the images on the walls began to move, showing scenes that shifted like living memory. Layla saw flashes of ancient Jerusalem being built, then destroyed, then rebuilt again. She saw conquerors, kings, prophets, and pilgrims, each moment layered upon the next, as if the city's entire history was unfolding before her eyes. Her vision blurred again, and she found herself standing not in the chamber, but in a sunlit courtyard, thousands of years in the past. People moved around her, unaware of her presence. They spoke in languages she did not recognize yet. She understood their meaning. They were builders laying the foundation of the first city. She felt their pride, their hope, and their fear, as if it were her own. Then the vision changed. The sky darkened, fires burned, and screams echoed through the streets. Babylonian soldiers marched with torches and swords. She saw the temple fall stone by stone, the cries of priests and women rising like wind. Her heart ached. As the city turned to ash, she reached out, but her hand passed through smoke. The scene dissolved into darkness, and she was back in the chamber, gasping for air. Tears ran down her face. She had witnessed the memory of the earth itself. It was not imagination. The chamber had shown her what had truly happened, the way the city had lived and died countless times. She realized that this technology, if revealed to the world, could rewrite every history book ever written. When she returned to the surface, dawn was breaking. Professor Ben Ari and Sister Miriam were waiting, their faces pale with worry. Layla told them everything she had seen. They listened in stunned silence. Sister Miriam crossed herself and whispered, "The city has spoken again. The time of silence is over." Over the next few days, they studied the lower chamber carefully. They found inscriptions mentioning 7 vaults each, hidden beneath different parts of Jerusalem, connected through tunnels that followed ancient water channels. Each vault was said to hold a fragment of the ledger, a different aspect of human memory. One guarded truth, one guarded faith, one guarded sorrow, one guarded knowledge, one guarded hope, one guarded sin, and the 7th guarded judgment. Layla realized that the disc she had found was only a key, a device that could awaken all the vaults together. But activating them without understanding could be catastrophic. Professor Ben Ari warned her that if the system was truly connected to the cities, foundations then disturbing it could cause tremors, even collapse. The earth itself might react. Meanwhile, the news had spread beyond their control. Government officials arrived demanding access. International agencies sent investigators. Religious leaders called for the site to be sealed. Some claimed the discovery would unite humanity. Others feared it would destroy belief itself. Jerusalem had always been sacred, but now it had become a ticking secret that could change everything. Layla and her team were placed under watch. The authorities wanted the disc moved to a secure facility for study. She refused, knowing that removing it from the chamber could break its connection and erase what they had seen. But her refusal made her enemies. Powerful men who saw opportunity instead of danger. That night, Sister Miriam came to her with a sealed envelope. Inside was a fragment of parchment written centuries ago. It read, "When the memory awakens, 7 voices shall rise. Those who seek truth must walk below and listen before the world above falls silent." The parchment was signed by a monk named Theophanes, who had lived in Jerusalem during the Crusader period. The words haunted Layla. She felt certain that Theophanes had known about the vaults. Perhaps he had even visited one. She began searching old monastic records and discovered a hidden reference to a place called the Gate of Silence, described as a passage beneath the Church of St. Anne. According to the text, it led to the second vault, the one said to hold the memory of faith. She knew what she had to do. Against all warnings, she prepared a small team to explore the passage. Sister Miriam insisted on coming, and Professor Ben-Ari, despite his failing health, refused to. "Stay behind." Sammy handled the equipment, and Fatima, the old woman whose home stood above the first chamber, gave them her blessing. "May the city protect you," she whispered. They entered the church at night, moving quietly through the shadows. A hidden stair behind the altar led them to a tunnel blocked by stone. They broke through, carefully revealing a narrow corridor, carved with crosses and stars. The air was cold and still. Their footsteps echoed as they descended into the darkness again. After an hour, they reached a massive doorway sealed with a slab of marble. In its center, the 7-pointed star was carved once more. Layla pressed the disc against it. The metal vibrated, the carvings lit up, and the door slowly slid open, revealing a vast, circular hall beyond. Inside stood hundreds of columns, each carved with scenes from different faiths, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and even older symbols, all blended together. In the center, a pool of still water reflected the ceiling, where thousands of tiny lights glowed like stars. The air shimmered with energy, and a soft voice seemed to whisper through the chamber, not from any person but from the stones themselves. Layla felt tears in her eyes. "The chamber of faith," she murmured. "This is where belief itself was remembered." Professor Ben-Ari stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Every prayer, every chant, every song ever spoken in this city, it is all here recorded in the vibration of the earth." As they moved deeper into the hall, the water in the pool began to ripple. The reflections shifted and formed images, not of people, but of light patterns, like souls made of energy rising and falling through centuries. Each one represented a moment of faith, a whisper of hope that had touched Jerusalem then. The floor shook gently, the columns vibrated, and the same low hum filled the chamber. The disc in Layla's hand glowed brighter than ever before. The pool of water turned completely luminous, casting beams of light across the walls. Sister Miriam clutched her cross and whispered a prayer. Layla felt the pull again, the same force she had felt in the first chamber, but stronger now. The light rose around her until she could no longer see the others. She heard a voice clear and calm, not in her ears, but in her mind. It said, "You have opened the second gate. The city remembers, all truth will rise and all lies will fall. Prepare for what comes next." Then the light vanished and silence returned. She found herself kneeling beside the glowing pool, the disc still warm in her hands. She looked up at the others, who stared back in awe. The voice had spoken to all of them. They knew then that the discovery was far from over. The vaults were awakening one by one, and with each one opened the balance of the world above would begin to change forever. The night sky above Jerusalem burned with a strange light, a faint silver glow that pulsed like a heartbeat across the horizon. As Layla and her team emerged from the second vault, the city felt different, quieter, as if it too was holding its breath. The streets were empty, the call to prayer echoing faintly through the old stone walls, carried by a wind that seemed older than time itself. They returned to the small base near Fatima's house, exhausted and shaken, but unable to sleep. The air buzzed with unseen energy, and every piece of metal seemed to hum softly. Sammy tried to measure the frequency, but his instruments flickered uncontrollably. The readings made no sense. The vault was active, and somehow connected to the entire city. Professor Ben Ari sat in silence, his frail hands trembling as he turned the disc over and over. His eyes reflected both fear and wonder. "This is not human technology," he whispered. "It predates everything we know. These vaults, they were built by a civilization that understood the language of the earth itself. They recorded not words, but truth." Layla stood by the window, staring out at the distant dome of the rock. She could feel something beneath her feet, a slow vibration like the breathing of the planet. Every step they took, every word they spoke, felt part of something vast and unseen. Sister Miriam joined her quietly, clutching a small notebook of prayers. "You saw the same light I did," she said. "It spoke to you too." Layla nodded. It said, "All truth will rise and all lies will fall." At dawn, heavy vehicles rolled into the narrow streets. Military officials, scientists, and religious authorities surrounded the site. The government had ordered a full lockdown. No one was allowed to enter or leave without permission. Rumors had already spread across the world. Social media exploded with claims that something divine or alien had been found beneath Jerusalem. Crowds began to gather, demanding answers. General Rahim, the officer in charge, met them at the dig site. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed tension. "The world is watching," he said. "We cannot afford panic. Whatever you found stays between us until we understand what it is." Layla hesitated, but before she could reply, a sudden tremor shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling, lights flickered, and people screamed as the vibration grew stronger. Then just as quickly it stopped. Silence returned, but the feeling of dread lingered. That night, Layla dreamed again. She stood inside a vast hall filled with 7 pillars, each glowing with a different color. The first 2 blazed with gold and silver, but the remaining 5 were dark. She saw shadows moving between them, figures of light and smoke. Their voices merged into one, saying, "When the 7th gate opens, the world will remember what it was meant to be." She woke, in a cold sweat, knowing what the dream meant. The vaults were connected like a chain of consciousness. Each one awakening brought the world closer to a truth buried for thousands of years. But not everyone wanted that truth revealed. The next morning, soldiers found the entrance to the 2nd vault sealed by solid stone again, as if it had never been opened. Sammy tried to scan through it, but his sensors detected nothing. It was gone, erased by the same energy that had awakened it. The authorities took it as a sign to stop the excavation, but Layla refused. She believed that shutting down the search would only make things worse. Together with Sister Miriam and Sammy, she followed the ancient maps again. This time the lines converged beneath the Mount of Olives. The texts called it the Chamber of Judgment, the 7th vault, the final one. She suspected that the others were awakening on their own, drawn by some force too old to understand. They began their descent through an old Roman aqueduct, leading under the mountain. The path was narrow, the air thick with dust and echoing water. For hours they moved in silence until they reached a great stone gate, far larger than the others. Symbols of every faith and language covered its surface, united in perfect symmetry. At its center, the 7-pointed star gleamed faintly. Layla placed the disc on the stone, and the walls trembled. The metal melted into the surface as if absorbed, and the entire gate began to glow. White light poured from the carvings, filling the tunnel and blinding them. When it faded, they stood before a vast chamber. Unlike any they had seen before, it was circular, its walls made of translucent crystal veins of gold running through them. At the center hovered a sphere, of light, rotating slowly, pulsing with life. Around it 7 platforms rose, each carved with a symbol of one of the ancient vaults. The air vibrated with sound so deep it felt more like a heartbeat than a tone. Layla stepped forward, and the sphere responded. It unfolded like a blooming flower, revealing images of the earth from above, not as it is now, but as it was before continents shifted and seas formed. She saw cities of light buried beneath the oceans, deserts that were once forests, mountains that had once been temples. The vision was overwhelming. The voice returned, this time louder and clearer than ever before. You have reached the heart of memory. The city is the keeper. The world is the witness. Humanity has forgotten its beginning and its purpose. The truth is neither holy nor forbidden, it simply is. Images filled the air, showing people from every era, praying, fighting, building, and destroying. The same cycle repeated endlessly. Civilizations rose and fell, always forgetting what it came before. The voice continued. The vaults were made to preserve what the earth saw, not what men believed. The time has come to remember. The chamber shook, the light flaring brighter. The ground split, and streams of luminous energy rose through the cracks, reaching toward the surface. Above them, Jerusalem itself began to tremble. Windows shattered, bells rang across the city, and thousands of people fell to their knees, watching a pillar of light erupt from the Mount of Olives. The soldiers outside. Panicked, General Rahim shouted orders, but radio's failed communication lines went dead. Satellites above recorded the phenomenon and transmitted it to the entire world. Within minutes, every screen across the globe showed the same image, a beam of pure light piercing the sky above Jerusalem. Inside the chamber, Layla and her team shielded their eyes. The sphere of light expanded and then divided into 7 smaller orbs, each rushing upward through different tunnels. Each orb carried the memory of one vault, and as they broke the surface, the ground calmed. The light faded, leaving silence behind. When they climbed back to the surface, the city was bathed in a strange calm. The air smelled of rain, though the sky was clear. Crowds filled the streets, crying, praying, and singing together for the first time in generations. It was as if the divisions that had torn Jerusalem apart for centuries had dissolved for a brief, sacred moment. Layla stood among them, tears on her face. She did not know if the world had been healed or only awakened, but she knew nothing would ever be the same again. The vaults had spoken their truth to humanity. The earth had revealed its memory, not to destroy, but to remind. Professor Ben Ari passed away peacefully. A few weeks later, leaving behind a single note written in his shaking hand, it said, "The stones have remembered. May we never forget again." Months later, when the world returned to uneasy normality, Layla visited the mount once more. The site was sealed by glass and guarded by every nation, yet when she placed her hand on the ground, she could still feel the faint heartbeat below. Jerusalem was alive and watching, waiting for the day humanity would be ready to listen once more. And as the wind whispered across the ancient hills, she understood that the secrets beneath Jerusalem were never meant to change faith, but to awaken truth. The earth had spoken through memory, reminding all who walked upon it that what lies beneath is not darkness, but the eternal light of remembrance.